I spent nearly a year's salary on a luxury car for a man who never once said, "I'm proud of you." That man was my father, and I thought this gift would finally earn his love. But inside my purse that night was something that would change everything. Hi, I'm Eliza Matthews. I'm 32 years old, a successful investment strategist in New York City. On paper, I've built a life most people would envy. But the truth is, no matter how hard I've worked, no matter what I've achieved, I've never been good enough for my father. Growing up in a rich neighborhood outside Boston, everyone thought we were the perfect family. Our big house, fancy cars, expensive clothes, we had everything. But behind those doors was a different story. My father, Richard Matthews, built a real estate empire from almost nothing. He was proud of that, very proud. He valued money, power, and reputation. What he didn't value? Emotion, warmth, family connection, especially not with me. From the time I was a little girl, I remember trying to get his attention. I'd show him drawings from school. He'd say, "Why didn't you color inside the lines?" I'd bring home a B+ on a test. He'd ask, "Why not an A?" Nothing was ever enough. My mom, Caroline, was kind, but only when he wasn't around. When Dad entered the room, it was like a switch flipped in her. She became quiet, nervous, careful, like she had to walk on eggshells all the time. I didn't understand it as a child, but as I grew up, I began to see how much power he held over all of us. I have two siblings. My older brother, James, 3 years ahead of me, was Dad's favorite, the golden child. He played football, dated pretty girls from the right families, and eventually joined Dad's real estate company. He could do no wrong. My younger sister, Sophia, had a different gift. She wasn't a top student or athlete, but she had charm. She could read any situation like a book. She knew when to smile, when to stay quiet, when to compliment Dad's tie or mention his favorite stock. She was the peacekeeper, the diplomat. And then there was me, always too direct, too ambitious, too emotional. I tried everything to earn his approval. I studied harder than anyone I knew. I got a full scholarship to Cornell. He wanted me to go to his alma mater instead. He called my choice a betrayal. In college, I worked 2 jobs to pay for everything else. Even then, he asked, "Why aren't you interning at better firms?" After graduation, he offered me a job at his company, but I knew it wasn't real. It was pity. I turned it down and moved to New York with just 2 suitcases and a dream. I worked my way up in finance, starting from the very bottom. No family connections, no handouts, just effort and grit. I lived on my friend's couch and ate instant noodles, but I didn't give up. I finally got a job at Goldman Sachs. When I called to tell him, he said, "Let's see if you last a month." I lasted 8 years. Last month, I became the youngest senior investment strategist in company history. My salary nearly doubled. I bought my dream apartment in Manhattan. And with my bonus, I bought something else. A brand new Mercedes S-Class. Not for me, for him. Why? Because after everything, I still wanted him to see me, to love me, to say those 3 words he never had. "I'm proud of you." That car cost almost a year of my salary. But I told myself, if this is what it takes, it'll be worth it. It was Father's Day weekend. The same time every year when the Matthews family gathered for our big reunion dinner, it was always about him. A celebration of Richard Matthews, the great patriarch, the self-made millionaire. This year I was going to stand out. I had worked so hard, given so much. This would be the year he noticed. I bought a dress that struck the perfect balance. Successful but not arrogant. Feminine but not weak. Exactly the image I knew he demanded. I pulled up to the family estate in that shiny black Mercedes, the ribbon still on the hood. I walked into that house hoping, no, praying that this would be the moment I'd waited for my entire life. But I didn't know inside my purse was something that would blow this family's perfect image apart. Something that would answer the question I had been asking my whole life. Why did my father never love me? I arrived at the estate around 5:45 p.m. just before sunset. The driveway was already full of luxury cars, Range Rovers, Teslas, even a vintage Porsche that probably belonged to Uncle Harris. But none of them compared to the black Mercedes S-Class I parked right at the front. My hands shook as I handed the keys to the valet. "Is this for Mr. Matthews?" he asked. I nodded. He gave a low whistle. "He's gonna love this." I smiled politely, but inside my stomach twisted. I wanted to believe him. I needed to believe him. The reunion was held in the backyard under a huge white tent. There were string lights, elegant flower arrangements, and caterers serving lobster sliders and champagne. Classic Matthews-style luxury that whispered, never shouted. People started greeting me. Cousins, aunts, old neighbors. The usual mix of fake smiles and small talk. They asked about my job, my apartment, New York life. But none of it mattered. The only person whose reaction I cared about hadn't arrived yet. And then I saw him. My father entered the backyard like he was stepping onto a stage. Tan suit, gold cufflinks, and that same confident walk that used to intimidate me as a child. Everyone turned toward him. Someone handed him a glass of scotch. Laughter followed him like perfume. I stood frozen for a moment. Then I made my move. I walked up to him, trying to keep my voice steady. "Hi, Dad." He turned slowly, gave me a once-over. "Eliza, you look successful." I wasn't sure if it was a compliment or a jab. Probably both. "I got you something," I said. "For Father's Day."
It's parked out front. He raised an eyebrow. A Mercedes, the one you mentioned liking. Fully loaded, I remembered. His expression didn't change, not even a blink of surprise. Finally, he said, "Well, that's generous." That was it. No hug, no thank you, not even a smile. I stood there, waiting for something more. But he was already turning to shake hands with a golf buddy. I felt like a ghost. Sophia appeared at my side like she always did during awkward moments. "Don't take it personally," she whispered. "You know how he is." "Yeah," I said quietly. "I know exactly how he is." Dinner was served around 7 p.m., a long U-shaped table under the tent, with name cards and crystal glasses. My father sat at the center, of course, James on his right. I was 2 seats down on the left, between Sophia and one of our cousins. The conversation was full of business talk, real estate trends, stock picks, politics. I tried to join in a few times, but I got brushed off or talked over. It was like I was still 16 at the kids' table. At one point, James raised a toast, to Dad, the man who built everything we see here. Everyone clapped. I raised my glass too, but my heart wasn't in it. My father stood up, nodded to the group. "I appreciate that. Family means everything to me." I almost laughed. Family meant everything as long as it followed his rules. And then something strange happened. He pulled a small envelope from his jacket. "Since we're all here," he said, "I want to make a quick announcement." People leaned in. "I've decided to begin the process of naming a successor for the company. It won't be immediate, but I'll be stepping back from day-to-day operations soon." Gasps and murmurs echoed around the table, and I've chosen James to take the lead. A cheer went up. People clapped again. James stood and gave a little wave, pretending to be humble. I stared at my plate, my throat burning. I wasn't surprised, but it still stung. He didn't even mention me. No acknowledgement of my career, my skills, or the fact that I was probably more qualified than James ever would be. I felt Sophia's hand squeeze mine under the table, but it wasn't enough. After dessert, I escaped to the bathroom to breathe. I shut the door and locked it, my chest tight. I pulled out my compact to fix my makeup, and that's when I remembered. The envelope. I had tossed it into my purse earlier that week, thinking I might need it for a legal question. It was an old copy of my birth certificate, something I'd found while clearing out my old files in New York. I pulled it out, not even sure why. I looked at the familiar lines. Name Eliza Matthews. Date of birth March 4. Mother Caroline Matthews. But then I saw something that made my hands go cold. Father field left blank. What? I blinked, thinking it had to be a mistake, but it wasn't. The space where Richard Matthews should have been was completely empty. I flipped it over, wondering if there was another page. Maybe it was an old version, but in the corner I saw the date, filed April 12, 1993. That was when I was 9 months old. Why would the birth certificate be blank? Was it an error, or was there something I didn't know? A knock came at the door. "Eliza?" It was Sophia. "You okay?" I shoved the envelope back into my purse. "Yeah, be right out." But I wasn't okay. Suddenly I was full of questions I had never dared to ask. What if the reason my father never loved me was because I wasn't really his daughter? What if everything I'd worked so hard for, his approval, his love, was never even possible to begin with? The rest of the evening passed like a blur. Back at the dinner table, I sat still, smiling at the right moments, nodding at conversations I didn't hear. But my mind was somewhere else, back in the bathroom, staring at that blank space on my birth certificate. How could it be blank? My father's name was missing from one of the most important documents in my life. A mistake? Maybe? But knowing my father, he never let mistakes happen. He was the type to triple-check every legal paper, every contract, every signature. I kept looking at him from across the table, wondering, did he know? Of course he did. That's why he never looked at me the way he looked at James or Sophia. That's why every accomplishment I ever made meant nothing to him. Because maybe I wasn't really his. That night I drove back to my hotel in silence. I didn't play music. I didn't call anyone. I just stared straight ahead, heart pounding. I couldn't sleep. I laid in bed replaying every memory from childhood. Every cold look, every missed birthday, every ignored trophy or honor. Had the truth been in front of me this whole time? By morning, I knew I couldn't leave Boston without answers. The next day, I met with my mother. She had invited me for brunch at her place. It was a quiet condo on the edge of town, far away from the Matthews family estate. After the divorce, she had chosen small, simple, and peaceful. I didn't understand that decision when I was younger. Now I did. She smiled when I walked in, wearing an apron and holding a tray of scones. "You look tired," she said. "I didn't sleep much." She nodded slowly like she already knew what was coming. We sat at the kitchen table. She poured tea, asked me about New York, work, the reunion. I waited. Then I reached into my purse. I placed the birth certificate on the table between us. Her hands stopped moving. "Mom," I said quietly, "why is Dad's name missing?" She didn't answer at first. She stared at the paper like it had come back from the dead. "I found it yesterday," I added, "at the reunion. I didn't even remember putting it in my bag. But when I looked at it, still, silence. "Just tell me the truth," I said, "please." She looked at me with tired eyes. "Eliza," she whispered, "you always deserved the truth. I just didn't know when the right time would come." I felt my throat tighten. "So it's true. He's not my real father. She closed her eyes. No, he's not. She took a deep breath and began to speak, her voice low, trembling. I was young and lonely. Your father, Richard, was already distant, always working, always angry. We were married, but it felt like I was living with a stranger. She paused, and then I met someone, a man named Daniel. He was kind, warm, nothing like Richard. I only saw him for a short time, but in that time I got pregnant with you. My hands went cold. Did Dad know? I asked. She nodded. Yes, I told him right after you were born. I thought he would leave, but instead, he stayed, on one condition. I waited, that we never talk about it again, that I put his name on everything moving forward, that we raise you as his, but there would be no affection, no closeness, just his rules. I stared at her. So he punished me, my whole life, for something I didn't even do. Tears welled in her eyes. He didn't want you, but he wanted to keep control. Appearances mattered more to him than love. My stomach turned. And James, Sophia, they're his biological children. She nodded. Yes, that was the final nail. The reason everything made sense now. I wasn't just the black sheep. I was never really in the herd. I left her house in a daze, walking past the flowers, the picket fence, the quiet calm she had built for herself. I sat in my car, staring at the wheel, heart racing. I wasn't sure what I felt. Anger, betrayal, relief. All I knew was this. I needed to find Daniel, the man who was my real father. I had no name, no last name, no photo, just Daniel. But I had one lead. My mom had said they met at a nonprofit she volunteered at in the late 80s, a community development center downtown. That was where I started. That afternoon, I drove to the old neighborhood. The community center still stood, though now it was a youth mentorship program. The receptionist at the front desk was helpful. She let me dig through some old staff records. Most had been digitized, but some remained in dusty file boxes. I found it. Daniel Carter, volunteer coordinator, 1989 to 1991. There was a photo, black and white, a young man with kind eyes and a quiet smile. I felt tears in my throat again. I wrote down the address listed in the file. It was old, but it gave me something, a place to start. That night in my hotel room, I stared at the photo for hours. I wondered what he was like, what he looked like now, whether he had a family, whether he ever thought about me. I wasn't sure if I would find him, or if he would want to be found, but I knew this. I was done chasing the love of a man who was never really my father. It was time to chase something real. Maybe, just maybe, it wasn't too late to find it. I woke up early the next morning, still holding the old black and white photo of Daniel Carter, my real father. The man I had never met. I had spent most of the night reading that name out loud, over and over again. Daniel Carter, a name so plain yet so powerful to me. He had been a ghost all my life, and now I had one small thread to follow. The file from the community center listed an old home address in Dorchester, a neighborhood about 30 minutes from the hotel. I didn't know if he still lived there, or if he was even alive, but I had to try. I typed the address into my GPS and began the drive. Dorchester was nothing like the wealthy suburbs I had grown up in. The houses were smaller, closer together. Kids rode bikes down the sidewalk. Some of the homes had porches with old rocking chairs and flags hanging above the steps. I found the house, a blue two-story with white trim. It looked cared for, with flowers growing along the fence, and a fresh coat of paint on the door. I parked across the street and just watched it for a while. What was I expecting? That he'd walk out, recognize me instantly, and say, "I've been waiting for you." Real life didn't work that way. Still, I had come too far to walk away now. I got out, crossed the street, and rang the bell. A woman in her 60s answered the door. Short gray hair, kind eyes, a warm smile. "Can I help you?" she asked. "Hi," I said, my voice shaking. "I'm looking for someone. Daniel Carter. I think he used to live here." Her eyes softened, and a sad look crossed her face. "He was my husband," she said. "He passed away 7 years ago." My breath caught. I wasn't ready for that. I'm sorry," I whispered. "I didn't know." She looked at me more closely now. "Did you know Daniel?" I hesitated. Then I said the truth. "I think he might have been my biological father." She invited me in. Her name was Helen. She led me into the living room, where photos lined the walls. Family portraits, holiday memories, snapshots of birthdays and beach trips. In the middle of them all was Daniel, older than the photo I had, but the same kind eyes. We sat on the couch and I told her everything. About my mother, about Richard Matthews, about the blank space on my birth certificate, about my search. She listened quietly, nodding sometimes, eyes full of emotion. When I finished, she reached for a small wooden box on the shelf. She opened it carefully, and took out a letter. "He wrote this before he died," she said. "He always wanted to find you. He talked about you often. Said it was the biggest regret of his life, that he had to walk away." Tears slid down my face before I could stop them. "He walked away," she nodded. "Your mother told him that the only way to keep the peace in her marriage was for him to disappear. She said you would have a better life that way." He didn't agree, but he respected her decision. He thought it was the right thing for you. I took the letter in shaking hands. It was addressed to my daughter, if she ever finds me. The letter was short, just 1 page, but it said more than Richard Matthews had said to me in 32 years. "Eliza, if you're reading this, it means you found me, or maybe you found the truth. I want you to know something very simple.
I loved you. I always did. I wasn't allowed to be part of your life, but not a day went by that I didn't think about you. I wondered what your favorite color was, if you liked books like I did, if you were kind, strong, brave. I'm proud of you. Even if I never got to see your life, I know you've made it something special. Please don't think I didn't care. I cared more than words can say. With all my love, Daniel Carter. I couldn't breathe. This was what I had wanted to hear my entire life, not from Richard but from someone. And here it was, in his handwriting, proof that I wasn't unlovable, that I hadn't imagined a hole in my life. I was loved, just in secret. Helen made tea while I sat quietly with the letter in my lap. After a while she returned with a small photo album. He saved this for you, she said. It was full of pictures of Daniel, volunteering, teaching, reading books to kids. In one photo he was holding a small stuffed animal. On the back it said, for Eliza, age 2, never delivered. My heart broke all over again. Helen told me stories about him, how he loved poetry, how he hated olives, how he could fix almost anything with duct tape and hope. The more she spoke, the more I saw pieces of myself in him. I stayed for hours. She didn't rush me. She just let me sit with the weight of it all. Before I left, she gave me the letter, the album, and the stuffed animal. I held it like it was made of glass. I think he would have been proud of you, she said softly at the door. I think he already was. I hugged her tightly. Thank you for everything. As I drove back to the hotel, the sun was setting, and the sky turned soft pink and gold. For the first time in years, I felt lighter, like a part of me had finally been returned. That night, I sat in my hotel room and wrote a letter of my own. Dear Richard, thank you for teaching me what love isn't. You showed me the emptiness of control, the weight of silence, the coldness of conditional love. But now I know something better. I found it in the words of a man who never got to hold me, but never stopped caring. I don't need your approval anymore. I never did. Goodbye. I didn't send it. I didn't have to. I had already moved on. The morning of my return to the Matthews estate was bright, almost too bright for what I was feeling inside. I had told myself I wouldn't go back. Not to that house, not to that man, not to the place that made me feel small, but something in me needed closure. It wasn't for him. It wasn't to prove anything. It was for me. I had spent most of my life trying to get his attention, his approval, his love. Now I just wanted to stand there, strong, whole, and finally at peace, and let him see what he could never break. I wore a simple outfit, no designer labels, no calculated perfection, just me. I didn't bring the Mercedes. I took a rental car instead. The expensive gift had served its purpose. It had shown me, painfully, how little things matter to a man with no heart. In the passenger seat was Daniel's letter. I kept it close, not because I needed it to face Richard, but because it reminded me that someone real had cared, that I was loved, even in absence. I pulled into the long driveway. I knew so well. The massive ditch, the perfect lawn, the three-car garage with security cameras, and fresh white paint. It looked the same, but I didn't. This time, I wasn't here to earn my place. I was here to take it back. I walked into the house like I belonged because I did.
Whether he accepted me or not didn't change the fact that I was a Matthews by name but no longer by burden. I found my father Richard on the back patio reading the paper like he had no care in the world. He didn't look up as I approached. Didn't expect you back, he said without looking. I'm not here for you, I replied calmly. That made him fold the paper. Oh, I came to return something. I placed the keys to the Mercedes on the table in front of him.
You can keep the car, he said flatly. It's already in my name.
I don't want it, I said. Not anymore. I'm done using money to try and buy love. His eyes narrowed. So this is about the dinner? You're upset I didn't make a speech. I laughed quietly. It was a sad kind of laugh, the kind that says, you really don't get it, do you? No, this is about the last 30 years, about every time you made me feel invisible, unworthy, unloved. He leaned back in his chair. You were raised in a mansion, sent to the best schools, given every opportunity, but never given love, I said, not the kind that matters. I reached into my purse and pulled out a copy of my birth certificate. I placed it beside the keys. He glanced at it, then looked away. So you know, he said. I know everything, I replied. Daniel Carter was my real father. You knew that. And instead of walking away like a decent man might have, you stayed, only to punish me for something that wasn't my fault. He didn't argue, he just shrugged. Life isn't fair, no, I said, but you made it cruel. He stood now as if to reassert his power, but it didn't work. He looked smaller to me than ever before. You think you're better than me now, he said, because you found some letter from a dead man? No, I said, I think I'm better than I was yesterday, and that's enough. He looked like he wanted to say something more, maybe something to wound me one last time, but I was already done listening. I spent most of my life trying to earn something from you. I worked myself into the ground. I became the youngest strategist at Goldman Sachs. I bought a car that cost more than some people make in a year, and none of it mattered to you. I took a deep breath, but now I see why. Because it was never about me. It was about power, control, ego, and I don't need to live under that anymore. He looked at me emotionless. You're making a mistake, he said. This family is your legacy. I smiled, truly smiled, for the first time in a long time. No, my legacy is what I build from here on. and it has nothing to do with your name. I walked out without looking back. Each step away from that house felt like lifting a brick off my shoulders. For years, I had carried the weight of trying to be good enough, of trying to earn love from a man who only knew how to withhold it. Not anymore. Outside, I took a deep breath of the early summer air. It smelled different now, freer, brighter. I pulled out my phone and called my mom. "Hi," I said. "I did it. You saw him?" She asked softly. "Yeah," I said, and I left without crying, without needing anything. I just left. She paused, then said something I hadn't heard from anyone in a long time. "I'm proud of you, Eliza." And this time, I believed it. That weekend, I went back to New York, but I didn't go back to being the old me. I started therapy, real therapy, not just the kind that fits in between meetings. I talked about Daniel, about Richard, about the little girl who had spent so long trying to be perfect. I began writing letters I never sent, to myself, to my younger self, to the version of me that sat in school waiting for him to show up, to the girl who stayed up late practicing her speech hoping he'd come hear it. I also started volunteering. I joined a mentorship program for young girls in underserved communities. I figured if Daniel couldn't raise me, maybe I could pass on a little bit of his goodness to someone else. One Saturday, a girl I was helping asked me, "How did you know you wanted to be in finance?" I smiled and said, "I didn't. I just knew I wanted to feel in control of my life. And now I finally do." I still think about Daniel sometimes, about the life we never had, about how different things might have been if he'd been there. But I also think about the woman I've become despite it all, not because I had a perfect father, but because I chose myself, and I'll keep choosing myself every single day.